Hey everybody, it's me, Scott from Heroxus Gaming. I have tried to move my mic out of my face because I saw my update video and realized that it was probably not fun for you guys to just see me like talking like this into the microphone. So anyway, how's it going? So it is good. I just have to speak up a little bit. Cool. Well, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about, this is actually Scott's book corner for January 2022. Today we're going to be talking about the Lone Wolf book series, first book called Flight from the Dark. Now, I actually own it, as you can see. It was a thing. So the story behind this, I'm going to turn my mic down because I'm like busting out my decibels. This book was actually written in 1984. And I didn't have it in 1984. I was born in 1984, so like I obviously didn't own it then. I wasn't actually able to get a hold of it until much later. And actually, it isn't the first book of the Lone Wolf like adventure games that I had. The first book I have the whole stack over here. The first book I actually owned was this one, which is why the cover's a little bit loosey-goosey on this one. But anyway, it's called the Chasm of Doom. At that time, I was a young lad. I didn't know how to pronounce that, so I referred to this book as the Chasm of Doom because I was dumb. But anyway, I later learned that you pronounce it chasm, and so then I like got smarter and I started pronouncing it correctly. But I was introduced to these books by a friend of mine. This is actually my favorite one, and the cover is real bad on this one. But I was introduced to these books by a friend of mine who had somehow found them, somehow come across them. And I think I was, what year was that? The year would have been 1996. That would have been the year. So they would have been about 10 years old. And according to the history of them, that was about the time that they stopped getting published. So somehow this person that I knew, this friend of mine, had found out about these books and had obtained a couple of them. And then their family ended up moving in with my family because I don't know if you know this, but when you're poor and you have trouble with stuff, you take whatever lodgings you can. And their dad and mom decided to divorce or something like that, and so they ended up like they were friends with my family, so they ended up living with us for way longer than they were supposed to. Like to the extent that like my sister got displaced, and I don't remember for some reason we were having to sleep out in the living room like camp style or like sleepover style. We're all in sleeping bags, but this was like every night. Like school night stuff. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is that they brought stuff with them, and amongst the things that they brought were these books, but they didn't have book 1 or book 2. I think they started with book 4, and they ended up staying with me because when they moved out, their mom sort of forgot a lot of their stuff, and it was like a fallout. So I ended up getting these books as mine, which is why I still have those ones with the beat up covers. But anyway. So the history behind these Lone Wolf books, they're written by Joe Deaver, which I thought was a pen name for a long time, but it turns out that's actually his name. But Joe Deaver was a British person, a person from England, who was a fan of fantasy stuff, and just a general like kid who grew up in England in the 50s and 60s, and in 1977. Was introduced to the fledgling RPG that you may or may not have heard of called Dungeons & Dragons. Probably heard of that. But anyway, was introduced to Dungeons & Dragons and became a big fan. In fact, his history with Dungeons & Dragons is actually pretty close. They used to, if you didn't know, they used to have competitions, and he was in an advanced Dungeons & Dragons competition in 1982, which he won. So he actually had a pretty close relationship with some of the people that made Dungeons & Dragons, and he, because of his love for the game, he started sort of making his own world, which he was originally called, it was going to be called China Rux or something like that. It was China Raux, like China Rao or something like that, right? And it was supposed to be this world that it eventually became the world from this books, but it was supposed to be a world that he was creating for Dungeons & Dragons to be something like Ravenloft or one of the other Faerun or whatever other sort of settings they were kind of coming along with. But it never really, it was also like, he was like running adventures for his friends in this particular setting. It was basically homebrewing, right? Like we've all done before. And that's what he was doing. It was going okay. He liked it quite a bit, but for whatever reason, I'm going to see if my notes will tell me. I can't remember if I wrote it down. For whatever reason, it didn't go. So like for whatever reason, there was like a publisher that he was working with that just decided not to go with it. And he had like written like a like a book that also sort of explained the world. He changed it from this China Rao or whatever to the land of Magnamund, which is like this northern kingdom. And he was going to go with it, and they just chose not to. So he eventually decided to like sort of kind of write the stuff that he'd been sort of thinking of in story form. And he started trying to write a book, and what he eventually realized was that he could create this, right? He could create a like choose your own adventure style its story, and it would be fun for solo players who, you know, didn't have gaming groups to play Dungeons and Dragons. So that was what he decided to do, because the publishing company kind of fell apart with the Dungeons and Dragons thing, and there was like probably, it doesn't say, but I'm assuming there was probably some legal thing that started happening, because Dungeons and Dragons at that time, like it would have been, you know, 83. They were having that was the time the Dungeons and Dragons started going real heavy on everyone that they thought was a competitor or was someone who was delving into their intellectual properties. So they were going all legal heavy on them. So he decided to go this route, where he wrote them as adventure books. And so the idea was you played this character, Lone Wolf, or in this book, you're actually named Silent Wolf, and then later you're renamed to Lone Wolf, because at the end of the book, you've survived a whole bunch of stuff, and the king says some jazzy madoodle that basically says your name is now going to be called Lone Wolf, right? Because you survived the lonesome wastes on your own. So what it says is this. So your name was Silent Wolf at the beginning of the story and throughout the whole story. But after you visit the king, he says, as you finish your story, the king approaches and takes your right hand in his. Lone Wolf, you have selfless courage, the quality of a true Kai Lord. Your journey here has been one of great peril, and although your news comes as a grievous blow, the spirit of your determination is like a beacon of hope to all of us in this dark hour. You have brought great honor to the memory of your masters, and for that we praise you. So that's when your name changes in this book from Silent Wolf to Lone Wolf. And from this point forward, you're named Lone Wolf. But the whole idea of these stories, the first 5, I have the 4 of the 5. I can't find book 3. They're not in print anymore, so that's part of the problem. But I have, so I had books 4. You can tell based on their usage that I actually had books 4 and 5 a long time ago, and I read them as a youth. Now the books 1 and 2. It turned out that you actually didn't need to read them. In fact, you don't even need to read any of these books at all in order. But we're focusing on this first one. But you can read that they're written to be standalone adventures, and at the very beginning, there's this section on like the story so far. The story, it literally says the story so far, and it gives you like the rundown. And so obviously, it gets bigger and bigger as the books go, because this one's just like, okay, so you're this kid and you do this thing and you're at this monastery and you're training to be this like super awesome, cool, like warrior person. And that's how it starts, right? That's what the first one is. And then it just continues to go from there. And so by the time you're at like book 20, it's like, so here's like 30 pages of backstory. But anyway, so we're focusing on the first book, and we'll cover the other ones later at some future point. But in this book, this starts you off with the story, and they actually remastered this. So Joe Deaver, he actually remastered this a little bit later. After 96, when they sort of went out of print, the publishing company that he was working with only printed the first 28 of the 31 proposed books in the series. And so this one was the first one, but in America, we actually didn't get books 21 through 28, and he was trying to finish it up, so he kind of went off on his own thing. Well, there was lots of fans he discovered, and so he had this plan to sort of revise them, and so there are actually revised editions of these books out there where he changed up, especially this first one, which was like his weakest one out of the whole group, which kind of sucks as the introduction. He changed it up to change this up so there's a little bit more going on. But in this original version, you start off with the story so far is that you're a kid that comes from like a noble family, like all of the other kids that end up becoming Kai Lords, and that's what they're called. They're called the Kai. They're sent to this monastery to become these super super impressive warriors, and like they have a history. The Kai are the ones that saved the world a long, long time ago versus the Dark Lords, who were trying to take over. So the Kai are essentially the Jedi of this world, and the Dark Lords of the Sith, right? That's sort of the idea going on here. And so they send so families send kids off. They go get trained. But these trained kids, like they eventually like leave the monastery, and they just basically go back to like live like normal lives, as it were. But they're all like trained to be these like super special, awesome people. It's not like a monk thing where you have to take vows of celibacy or anything like that. It's literally just like they train these kids, and then these kids go off to be captains of the army, and they do all these different things. They just sort of ingratiate themselves in society, but all part of this like this special group of like people who have like special handshakes and all kinds of stuff, right? So they're these warriors that are spread out along the world. Well, because of the victory a long time ago in which the Kai defeated the Dark Lords, there's a celebration every year in which all of the fraternity of Kai, they all get together at the main monastery, and everyone has like a big feast to remind them of this like event that happened. It happened so long ago that nobody's really thinking that, like, it's not like a thing where there's like a constant like fight or war going on in the background. No, this is over. It's been over forever. And so no one's really thinking, it's just a tradition. It's been a tradition for the last, 2,000 years or whatever. No one was thinking anything's wrong, so they all gather there. They're all having the feast, and your character in this original version is out chopping wood because of some stupid reason. When in class you weren't paying attention or whatever because you're a young dumb kid, and everybody dies. Everyone dies because the monastery gets attacked by the Dark Lords, who have been slowly regaining power, and they finally decide that it's time to attack. And so your character is the only survives because you're not in the monastery when it gets attacked by the minions of the Dark Lords. So you wake up after you see the attack happen. You try to go help, and you get knocked unconscious by something. You're not aware of what it is. It just says some dark shadow descends upon you, and you find yourself unconscious. And then when you wake up later, everybody's dead. So you've got to go, figure out what to do. And so obviously your thoughts are, well, I've got to go into the capital and let the king know that there's some stuff happening. I got to tell people that the Kai are dead because if this is the Dark Lords, then everyone's going to expect the Kai to come save everyone. But the first strike was a successful one, and so all the Kai are dead, and I, the main character of this, am the last remaining survivor. So it's the reason why this one's weak is because in the unrevised version, the entire book is essentially the overland travel from the monastery to the capital of Holmgard, and all the stuff that happens to you along the way. You're also quite weak, and so the way that this book is designed, unlike most choose your own adventures, it is not designed where like the pages are like one page is one section. Now, these are written in paragraphs, and as you can see, there are like multiple options as you would expect, but then there are some that just say go to this other thing, right? And so that's kind of typical for choose your own adventures. But this book is like a game in that you have a character sheet. So when you start off, like in the very beginning, you kind of get the what's going on now, and then you have to sort of figure out what your skills and disciplines are. And you get to, just like any other sort of fantasy game, Dungeons & Dragons type character, you actually get to pick some things, and then you have some random generated numbers. So what you do is you're supposed to use, if you play the game originally as written, then you use these little tables in the back for your random number generation. Now, obviously a D10, because this is 1 through 10. A D10 also works, right? So you can easily just use a D10, but they have this in case you didn't. And when I played it, I didn't have a D10, so I would just stab at this. And as I cheated a lot, stabbing at the numbers when I was supposed to choose them, and I would always try to choose the best of the numbers. I have talked to other people who were familiar with these, and they also did the same thing. Like it was like everybody cheated. So using a D10 was much better, but most people just used I'm going to cheat and poke at a 0 so I don't take any damage in the combat kind of thing. Yeah. And so anyway, so you're supposed to sort of choose that, the randomly generated number, or you can roll a D10, and then for your skill, so when you're making your stats, you have your skills, endurance, those are your 2 stats. then you'd roll the number, pick the number, and then add 10 to it, and that's your combat skill, and then the same thing, but add 20 to it, and that's your endurance points. When you go to fight stuff, because you fight things along the way, the idea is you're supposed to put your combat number on one side, their combat number on the other side, as you see here, and then the ratio is the difference between them. So if it's a positive on your side, then you put that. If it's a negative on your side because they're higher than you, then you put that, and then you would randomly choose a number. And this little guy right here, this chart would then tell you how much damage you took versus how much damage they took. So for example, if we were equally matched by this column here, if we were equally matched in the 0-0 ratio, if we're equally matched, and so like these are not supposed to be like +1 and +2. No. It means like if it's 1 or 2 over, right? They're over, you're over them. Then this is what happens. And then you choose. Then you would choose a random number. So you see this on the side here, there's these numbers. So you basically go, okay, well, if it's 0-0 and I chose randomly selected a 7, then I am going to take 1 damage and they're going to take 9. Right? It's like that. That's how you do it. So the game could present these situations where there's like, okay, you're walking along, you're doing a thing, and you get attacked by some beastly creature, some dude riding a dragon thing from the sky, and it drops down on you. It's got a stat number. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, right there. So this is those are the stats right there for the thing we just looked at, right? Because that's where it came from. So the illustration's on the other side. So it has a combat skill of 17 and endurance of 25. So I'll just keep repeating the process of like looking at the ratio, rolling a number, looking at the ratio, rolling a number, looking at the ratio, rolling a number, until either I die or they die, right? And so just an example, I just played through this just to make sure I remembered the story. This was the character sheet that I made, essentially, based on this stuff. And you can see that my combat skill was 16. So in that particular situation, I would have been in a -1 status and would have hoped to roll things like 10s so that I took the least amount of damage in the -1 category. See, if I rolled a 10, I would take 0 damage and the enemy would take 11 damage, right? And so 3 rounds, and that would have ended that fight with the guy on the back of the dragon thing. And that's how it works. Sometimes the story would say something like, if you beat them in 3 rounds, go to here, or if you beat them in 1 round, go to here, or if you, after 3 rounds, you haven't beaten them yet, go to here. Because then like there would be these like things where like reinforcements would show up, or like if you beat them in 1 round, you kill the rider, but the thing flies off with the rider dangling wildly, and so all of his pockets get dumped down to the ground, and you get all of his cool stuff, things like that. So it's a really cool story, but this particular one, the first one, is boring. Fight from the Dark is essentially the story. Like I described just a minute ago, it's literally just you traveling overland. And a lot of the sections, especially in the beginning, like a lot of the things are like, do you want to go left or right down this path? Do you want to go into the forest? Do you want to follow the river? Do you want to go see what the smoke's all about? Or do you not want to go see what the smoke's all about? And so it turns into like this weird thing of like just kind of wandering around. It would have been better if it's like had some combat thrown in the very beginning and like maybe used the disciplines a lot more, the special abilities, which come up where it's like if you have the tracking skill, go here, and then you go there, and it's like there are tracks here that show that wolves are in this direction, so that's the safe path, like that kind of thing. They do that a little bit in this book, but not really. Well, the revamped version does it a lot better. Apparently, in the revamped version, you actually do fight instead of just get knocked unconscious in the very beginning, and then also the disciplines are utilized a lot more frequently in the first bunch of sections, because that's how you learn how to do this game book. So anyway, however, I will say that while I'm saying that this particular book is boring, it is nice if you want to establish yourself as a baseline for the universe and want to continue on, because there's one special cool feature that goes on with these, and I'll end this video here. The special cool feature that goes along with playing these straight through or playing them from the beginning is that you have these disciplines. I'm hoping the camera will focus. Yeah, there it is. You have these disciplines right there where you get to choose these special abilities that you have and the things that they do. And if you see there, it says, so you start with 5, right? And it says 6. You can have a 6th if you've completed book 1 successfully, right? So this character sheet's used for all of the books. And so there's the first 4 or 5, that same phrase if you've completed the first book, but they grow. So I'll show you on this one. I'll go to the character sheet on this one, and somebody's written in it, probably me. But if you look right there, you can see that there's 9 now, and it says like if you completed book 1, if you completed book 2, if you completed book 3, if you completed book 4, right? So so if you do read them from the beginning, each time you take the next book, you actually have more disciplines. If you read them as a standalone, like if you just were to pick up book 4, which is what I did, then what you'll have is something like you'll only have the 5 that you get to start with, because that's the standalone. Now you can see that I had others because I went back and played them. These are from when I was a kid. No, actually, this is my dad's handwriting. No, this is my handwriting. It was just like mimicking my dad's handwriting. I can tell by some of the letters that it's my handwriting. Anyway, so there is a benefit to going through and reading the really boring one, unless you can find the revised one, which is apparently better. But anyway, I will give Flight from the Dark. I'll give it like a 1 thumb up. As far as game books go, it's 2 thumbs up. It's interesting, but the story itself is really boring. If you cannot get a hold of book 1, which is quite possible because it's out of print, the best way to actually get a hold of these books, and I'll try to put it in the description of this video, but the best way to get a hold of them is actually to go to their website, the website called Project Aeon, Project AON, and they have there the books. It was actually a fan site that was created in the mid-2000s-ish to get these books. Project Aeon, it's projectaeon.org. That's what it is, projectaeon.org, and it was to get these books sort of out there so people could read them. And then I think they started doing other game books as well. But I'm messing myself up by trying to open a website while recording. Diminished capacity. Anyway, but Project Aeon, that's how you can get a hold of them, and you can play them there. The Project Aeon ones, you have to keep track of your own stuff, but I will tell you next time on this channel, I will tell you how to play these game books without having to keep track of everything, because there are actually 2 different phone versions of these game books. There's also an actual game, which is what I'm going to cover in the video game video, but I'm also going to talk about in the video game video briefly how to play this with your phone, because there's basically a phone app where they have these books and they have the story, and what it does is it starts you off in book 1. You have to start with book 1, both of them. They're both just 2 different companies that try to do it. Both of them start you off with book 1. You have to start with book 1, but as you go through, it keeps track of stuff. So when you start the next book, it's like, okay, cool, pick a new discipline, right? And like, oh, here's your weapons that you had from the last time. So you actually just keep to move through, which is really helpful, trying to remember that you have like special weapons like the summer sword and stuff, because if you forget that you have it, it's supposed to be giving you like a benefit to your combat skill and stuff. The game book on the apps, both of them will actually automatically track that, so your stats and everything will be bonused or bumped up from the special items you've picked up through the stories. All right, that's it. This is a very long video, but it's just because it's the thing that I'm passionate about. The next video on these books won't be quite as long because I will have already covered the history of them, and maybe I'll delve a little bit more. There's some more history about that, but yeah, so we'll get into that next time. But anyway, that's it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you actually get to try this out, because these were like this was how I found out. Like, I was into Choose Your Own Adventures, and like this was a different style, and this is sort of one of those stepping stones that led me into the world of tabletop RPGs. So I will see you guys all later.